You've heard the buzz, right? AI agents. The excitement is just electric. We're being told they're about to autonomously run our businesses, discover new medicines, and pretty much revolutionize every industry out there. But, behind all that hype, there's a much more complicated story going on.
And this is where it gets really interesting. This is the central paradox we need to unpack. How can something be the next huge breakthrough, and at the same time have reports claiming that a staggering 95% of them fail in the real world? What is the secret sauce that separates the tiny few that actually work from the vast majority that just crash and burn?
Well, thankfully, we now have some real answers. A brand new study called Measuring Agents in Production went out and did the hard work. They actually asked the people on the front lines. We're talking over 300 practitioners and 20 super in-depth case studies to figure out what is really going on. And this gives us an incredible look under the hood of the agents that are actually succeeding out in the wild.
So, here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll tackle that big paradox of hype versus reality. Then, we'll dig into why companies are even building these things. After that, the really fun part, how the successful agents actually work. Then we'll see how they're judged, what the #1 challenge is, and finally, what it all means for the future of agents.
All right, let's get right into it. First up, that core conflict. The incredible, world-changing promise of AI agents versus the brutal reality of trying to make them work reliably day in and day out.
So, to figure out what works, you have to ask a more basic question first. With all these challenges, why are companies even bothering? Are they all trying to invent some brand new sci-fi technology? The answer, it turns out, is a lot more down to earth.
And what we see here is just wow. The #1 reason, by a massive margin, is good old-fashioned productivity. A full 73% of people said their main goal was just to get tasks done faster. So it's not about replacing humans with some kind of super intelligence. It's about making humans faster by automating the boring, repetitive stuff.
And who are these agents being built for? Well, overwhelmingly, they're for other humans. And specifically, over half are for a company's own employees. Now, this is a really key point, because when you deploy an agent internally, the stakes are lower if it makes a mistake, and you always have an expert right there who can supervise it and fix things. Okay, this brings us to the real heart of the study, and this is where we start to bust some major myths. It turns out, the agents that are actually working in production look nothing like the super complex, all-powerful systems you might be imagining.
All right, myth #1, the myth of complexity. You would think, right, that to build a really powerful agent, you'd need some highly specialized, custom-trained model that you spent months fine-tuning on your own data.
But the reality? Nope. A whopping 70% of teams are just using powerful, off-the-shelf models from places like OpenAI or Anthropic, with no custom tuning at all. They found that for a huge number of valuable tasks, just being really clever with your prompting is more than enough.
Okay, the second huge myth is all about autonomy. We have this picture in our heads of an agent that gets a really complex goal and then just runs off on its own, executing hundreds of steps like some tireless digital employee. But again, the data shows the complete opposite. Get this, 68% of agents in the real world execute 10 or fewer steps before they have to stop and get a human to help out. Success today means keeping your agent on a very tight leash. So, maybe the best way to think about this is that a successful agent today isn't a genius robot, it's more like a really skilled intern. It needs clear instructions, that's your prompt. It needs a very specific, limited scope of work, that's the small number of steps. And it needs to check in with its manager all the time, that's the human in the loop.
And that brings us to one last little myth bust, the tools. A lot of people think you need complex frameworks like LangChain to build an agent. But the study's deep dive interviews found something fascinating. 85% of the really experienced teams build their agents completely from scratch. Why? For one simple reason, control. They want maximum control and simplicity.
Okay, so if these successful agents are kept so simple and so constrained, how do teams even know if they're working? How do they measure success? Well, the answer, once again, comes right back down to people.
So let's walk through the typical evaluation process. First, teams will work with experts to create a golden set of perfect answers. Then, they might use another AI to do a quick first pass at grading the agent's output. But here's the key. Anything that gets a low score goes straight to a human.
And even for the stuff that scores high, they're constantly pulling samples for humans to spot check. I mean, the study puts it right out there. Almost 3/4 of all agents out there depend on a human in the loop as their main way of checking quality. At the end of the day, the ultimate decider of whether an agent is doing a good job is still a person.
And now we get to the big why. Why are all these successful agents so simple? Why are they kept on such a short leash? Why is human oversight so critical? It all boils down to the single biggest challenge in this whole field.
When you ask developers what their biggest headaches are, you see a lot of things you'd expect, like data issues and system integration. But one category just towers above all the others: core technical performance. And what does that mean? In simple terms, it's reliability, robustness, just making the agent work correctly and consistently every single time. It's the hardest part of the job. And that right there, that's the key that connects all the dots. The simple designs, the off-the-shelf models, the short workflows, the constant human check-ins. These are not signs of failure or a lack of ambition. They are smart, deliberate engineering choices made to solve the fundamental problem of reliability. So let's put this all together. What does this tell us about the road ahead? What can we learn from the teams that are actually getting this stuff to work today? The message from the front lines is incredibly clear. First, simple works. You don't always need a custom-built, fine-tuned beast. Second, control is everything. Limiting an agent's autonomy is the secret to making it reliable right now. And third, humans are absolutely essential. They're still the ultimate supervisors and the gold standard for quality. And this really leaves us with the final, critical question for the future, doesn't it? The story of AI agents today is one of carefully managed and constrained power. So the great challenge ahead isn't just about making models bigger or smarter. It's about making them so profoundly reliable that we can finally and confidently take off the leash.